to this slide real quick because we're recording, and then we're going to go to this slide. So yeah, again, PDIG. I like to solve problems with development. That's kind of my approach. If I can do something custom and code it out instead of turning on the contrib module, that's what I always do. No worries. As my boss can attest, I'm always going out to him and being like, should I use this contrib module or should I just do it myself? Because 9 times out of 10, I want to do it myself. So that's the kind of developer that I am. And as I mentioned, I work for Bluecadet here in Philly. Bluecadet is an experience design agency. We partner with mission-driven organizations to create a broad suite of products and environments. We embrace design, technology, and innovation in the service of content, emotion, and experience. We create experiences that engage audiences through increased knowledge, empathy, and action. And just kind of as a side note to think about where we're approaching things from, we don't really consider ourselves a Drupal shop. We do want to use the right tools for the right products. That said, we use Drupal, we use the other CMS for a lot of our backend needs. And this year we're actually slated to really look into CMSs. A lot of what we do is decoupled. So we're looking into other alternatives for CMSs. But my gut feeling is, especially for the websites that we do, the people that we work with, we're going to be using Drupal for a long time, and a long time in the future, just because it meets the needs of our clients, specifically for the websites. So who is this talk for? First, anyone's considered a site builder. If you're a person who goes through and clicks a lot through the site but doesn't touch code, I think this will help a little bit. Moderate to advanced coders, but really anyone interested in helping speed up their process. This is something that we're going through Bluecadet, really trying to work on how we're building our websites. We do a lot of custom designs, and we try to approach things custom, but we're realizing it's just, we're redoing the same thing over and over again a lot of times, and we just want to speed up our process a little bit more. So what we'll cover today, again, just kind of our process of how we're building our sites, our frustrations, hopefully some solutions for everyone. A couple of key points of how Drupal really works in order for us to tinker with it. And again, we're specifically talking about new site builds. If you're primarily like maintaining sites, hopefully this will be a little useful, but primarily what we're doing is building new websites, and it's a process for bringing out new websites all the time. And I'll be honest, hopefully a lot of discussion. This isn't the longest talk. And I wanted to do this because I wanted to talk with people and have some good Q&A time and kind of see what other people are doing as well. So I figured that was a good reason to try to give a talk, and then it got accepted too, so that was cool. So before we dive into all this stuff, there's 2 main points of how Drupal works that I kind of wanted to cover that's kind of led us in this direction of what we're doing. First of all, there's a lot of code, a lot of logic, functions, and methods behind all of this work that we do. And we all know this as developers. There's a UI, it's kind of nice and pretty, but what's really happening in the back end is all this code, all this stuff. Sometimes it's hard to understand it and see it and really follow it, but it is there. Especially with Drupal 8 now, we are saving everything to configuration files and to these YAML files. So you can kind of see what's going on. You have access to these files. You can do things with these files, although you're not really supposed to. But we're developers, right? Like we're allowed to do things as developers. We're smart people. So this is one thing I just wanted to show. Just you can see here on the right, your typical managed display for a node. This is an alert content type. We're telling the alert message. We're hiding the label. We have a trimmed format. We're trimmed to 200 characters. If you've done any work in Drupal, you've seen this updated 100 times. But also in the back end, I can do this all through code. There's a view method on a field that you can call and hand in the same stuff. So we have the label, the hidden type, text trimmed, and the settings for that is the trim length is 20. So a lot of times in our themes, we'll have like an optional parameter for how we're displaying an image, or maybe optionally displaying some text. And instead of being able to set it here and only being locked into that, I can now use that method to switch around my settings for this, and I can do that on the front end. So it's pretty handy. We use this method a lot. And actually, we go to the YAML file too. So this is actually the configuration for that display as well. And again, we have all that same stuff. There's text trimmed, you can see that. The regions content, label is hidden. The settings, the trim length is 200. So again, like all that stuff is being passed around, and we have access to all these things. So this is kind of the underlying, just kind of base of how Drupal is working, to be able to figure out how we can start tinkering with things. Oh yeah, this is another example. We're creating a content type here. This is pulled from some other code, which we'll be going over later on. But this is how programmatically we can create a content type. We don't have to go through the UI to create it. It's very simple. The basic part is very simple. Then we get into a little bit more complex stuff as far as third-party settings. So like how menus show up on the node edit page. Technically, it's third-party settings. And then you'll see at the bottom here, the status to promote the sticky, those checkboxes. That's how they get added. But again, all of this code is in Drupal core modules. If you look at the node module, this is copy and pasted from my module that I copy and pasted from Node, the Node module. Again, it's all right there. If you want to dive into it, you can grab it, you can see it. It's right there. So what's the problem? Well, in my opinion, development, site building takes forever. It's a long time. You're clicking through things. A lot's going on. Specifically clicking through the admin, there's a lot of clicks. So I did a little test for this. How many clicks to set up one simple content type and a plain text field? It took me, again, just kind of, this is the video right here that's showing it. It took me 2.5 minutes and about 13 clicks to simply set one field. I knew exactly what I was doing. I didn't try to think about it. I wasn't trying to architect anything. It doesn't sound that bad, but 13 clicks is kind of a lot. The other thing when we're talking about our bigger projects, we have to do revisions to content types and fields. We're talking about 13 clicks in 2.5 minutes for every little thing. It does add up very quickly. Just as an example, I worked on a project last fall, and it was the first phase of the project. We had 18 content types, 9 paragraph bundles, 5 taxonomies, and close to 300 fields. We reused some of the fields, but this was a decoupled project, so we really weren't reusing a lot of fields. We had very specific fields. That ended up being a little bit of a mistake, but that was a different side of the story. Altogether, using these numbers, that's about 700 minutes or 11 hours of work if I know exactly what I'm doing, without daydreaming, without getting sidetracked, without somebody asking a question. The site, it was, I would say, a medium-sized site. 300 fields is a lot of fields, but it's not terrible. The other thing going along with this is we typically do a lot of the same things. We'll have an image field, but we might need to name it something different, but our form is going to be the exact same thing. We use media browsers or any browsers for all our images and image fields, and we use inline entity fields form modes. So we're doing the same thing on any kind of image field. And has anybody used media browsers, entity browsers? Does anyone like creating a new entity browser? Okay, great.
Maybe on a weekend.
Maybe on a weekend.
It's better than 8.7 though.
8.7? Oh,
yeah,
really?
Media is
Wow.
part of core now, so
Sweet.
yeah.
So they're just there's a lot going on. There's a lot of pain. I should have done the media browser, see how many clicks that was, because that is really annoying. So ultimately, time equals money. We all know this. We all work. This is, I think, maybe probably everyone's job here. If we can save time, we can move on from clicking on the website to doing the more fun and the fun parts of the site. So, first of all, what do we have out there already? What do we have available for us to help speed things up? Well, we have installation profiles. Drupal provides installation profiles, which are nice. We have distributions. Again, as we talked about, we have these config files that we can do something with. We'll get there. Similarly, in D7, we had the features modules. Loosely, we can kind of relate that to a config split module in D8. If you're familiar at all with that, you can split up your configuration into different folders and then turn on and off different splits based on what environment you're on, all that kind of stuff. It's a really cool module. If you're interested, take a look. But again, let's define some of these things. An installation profile provides site features and functions for a specific type of site, has a single download containing Drupal core, contributed modules, themes, predefined configuration. So basically, you can have a lot of modules. You can have kind of things bundled up. It's pretty handy. They're really nice. Distributions kind of take it one step further. They are kind of like the whole site is almost like pretty much pre-built for you in a sense. You can read this. Again, these are all coming from Drupal.org. I forgot to cite them, I think, but it's all off of the Drupal.org site. But distributions come as complete solutions for specialized use cases, quick start tools, starting points for developers and site builders. First of all, if these tools work for you and your organization, use them. They're great. They're good tools. I'm not trying to downplay them at all whatsoever. If they work for you, great. In our use cases, we typically don't use them. It takes too much time to maintain them, and we're not launching sites every other week. So the time and effort to really work on these isn't kind of worth it for us in a sense. So we're trying to figure out other ways of handling this. So what do we want? Well, it's kind of a joke in our office a little bit as we talk about a lot of these things. We always say we want a React admin theme.
That's common, actually.
Well, so if you look at the strategic initiatives admin, UI.js, no worries. It is coming, but my fear with that is, as with anything in Drupal, by the time it's really fully usable, it's still going to be 5-6 years down the road.
I know someone who's working on that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. So a React admin theme would help speed things up for sure. I'm excited about this, but again, it might be a few years down the road. The other option is to really hire a lot of interns, and they can do all the fun clicking instead of me, but that's a different story. So now let's get into the meat of it. So what are we doing at Bluecadet? Well, I'm just going to outline a couple things, and we'll get into details on all of these items. So the first thing is snippets, internal documentation. Is kind of a big thing. What I call config modules. So these are very closely related to what you would consider a feature module in Drupal 7. There's a little bit different because of the way config is handled now in D8. And then something I like to call the importer, and that'll be the fun part later on, where we actually build a site, hopefully in 5 minutes. So first of all, snippets and internal documentation. So Bluecadet, we really try to fully document what we do for each project, and the try is bolded, and I am terrible at documentation, to be honest with you, and I'm trying to get better at it. But we're trying to build it into our process. We want to make documentation available to our teams in an easy way. So if we have new hires, they can easily access it and get to it. We use GitHub wikis, DocPress within GitHub, Fractal docs. For our front end, we're using Fractal a lot now, and there's a great session by this guy right here at the end of the day on Fractal, if you're interested. And they have like a doc section in there too that you can start building documentation. But again, we want it easily available. We were using Google Docs for a while, and it is a pain because you have to like do permissions, and then you can't find the doc later on, and I want to go back to it. So yeah, I always found that to be hard and difficult to work with. So again, providing whatever works for your organization. You might have an internal documentation system already, but you want to make it available to your teams, especially new hires, to get them on board quickly, fastly. I believe in making it as copy-paste friendly as possible. So whether it's kind of command lines, or again with Fractal, if you're familiar with it, there's like components that you can use. So we're just grabbing directories, and we can copy and paste that whole directory into our new project. So being able to do that kind of stuff helps for a number of reasons. We don't have to rewrite. We don't have to like skip things. We can copy paste. And again, we try to build this into our workflow. We just need to do it. So right now at Bluecadet, we, on Fridays after lunch, we're doing a lot of sprint planning for our projects, which has been great because Friday no one ever wants to do work after lunch. And so we do the sprint planning and get that out of the way, and then we've now set up time after that to work on our documentation, to work on this, to specifically handle this internal stuff. It's kind of nice. We can sit back with a beer sometimes and not have to worry about the actual client work. And we can really work on this time. So we set aside that time. Our PMs know it. We don't have deliveries during that time. All kind of stuff. It's kind of great. We can work on these internal tools. So I would recommend that for anybody. Set aside the time. If I keep thinking about it, I never do it. We have to schedule the time just to do it. So a snippet example. I don't have very good examples for this, but this is just one thing that we have in our documentation. I have lists of modules out, so if we're doing a Pantheon site and we have some basic admin stuff, this is something I can quickly copy-paste the drush command, and I can just run it. So instead of having a distribution or something that may have most of the modules that I need, and then I need to add something else, I just have a list of modules that I need. Copy and paste, it enables everything. I also have like We use Composer now for everything, so we have Composer commands to require everything. But again, it just makes it a little bit easier. I just made the example yesterday, and I used all that stuff. It was kind of nice and handy. I didn't have to think too much. Okay, moving on to the next item, config modules. So again, this is something we've loosely named. So what do I mean by this? They're closely related to the features modules. And one reason that we're doing this stuff is we consistently are doing certain things over and over again. As I mentioned, how we set up our fields, how we set up our display formatters, how we display our forms. We're using the same things over and over again. And I'll show you some more specifics. Again, this is at least a base, so alerts we use as a content type on multiple sites. We always have an alert message, and we have a view that displays our alerts. Each site, we might have different things going on with other levels. We have icons in the latest project that we're working on. But we have this config module that just gets that view going, gets that basic content type. It's not necessarily the biggest time saver for that module in and of itself, but it does help get us that base. So how do they work? Well, we install the module. Config is imported, because if you have it in the right directory, Drupal imports your config files. We run a hook install, and so that could be some custom code that might be run. And then we uninstall the module, because we don't need the module anymore. We discard the module. So again, I'll show you an example here. So this is, again, the alert content type that we're talking about. This is the latest project they're working on for Bucknell. In the module, we just have these things, and we added this alert level. We've added the icon field. So we have a content type with a set number of content fields. And again, a view to display the alerts, and we have these 8 config files. And so it's a very, very simple, basic module. And this other module is a media module. So again, getting back to the idea of all the entity browsers, all of the fields we do caption and credit fields in all our media entities, our images and videos. That's kind of our standard working process right now. We added taxonomy so people can search and find their media quickly. We had, this last project we downloaded 52,000 images, and then they realized they didn't actually want that folder, and it was down to about 1,000 images, I think. So we started out with 52,000 images. It's hard to find the right image that you want. So we always add this media taxonomy. We can use that in the entity browsers to search and kind of filter out the images that we need. We always use the same media entity browsers. Now everything has the same machine names. So when I'm trying to set up that form, if I don't have the right machine name, so it helps having these config modules so we can standardize the machine names, we can do all that kind of stuff, we can automate a lot of this stuff. So again, for this module, the media module, you can see these are just all the config files that we have that we're going to install on install. And here we're actually starting to create the entity browsers. So we're using hook install function, and I just set up a basic config. So sorry, let me take a step back. If you're familiar with entity browsers and the config files that you look at them, I think they're plugins, so they use a UUID. So there's no way to create a config file specifically for an entity browser. It's kind of a pain. So this is why we need custom code sometimes in our module. We can import all the other config files, but we can't really import entity browsers. So I'm defining all our entity browsers. This is a very short piece of a very long thing that defines all of our entity browsers. And then here we're looping through those and creating the entity browser. Now this creates the config in the database, so I can export it, commit it to our files later on. We won't necessarily go into all the code, but basically right here at the top, it says entity browser load. We're checking to see if one exists. If it doesn't, entity browser create. And again, using that config array, it's pretty straightforward. The code is all there. If you look at the entity browser modules, they're right there. Easy to copy and paste. So recap. So we install these modules, install the config, because all our config being in the module. Then we run the hook install if we want these custom codes. The media one, and we'll demo that at the end. And then we uninstall it, and we can discard the module. Again, we don't need the module. It doesn't need to be there. It's an extra thing that there's no other purpose to the module other than getting that config into the into the site. So the next thing, or the last thing here, excuse me, is the importer. So this has kind of been my baby for the past few months. I'm still slightly hesitant about putting it out into the world and where it's going, but it's been kind of cool. It's been a fun process so far, and hopefully it'll get other people thinking and wondering what's going on. So just to give you a little bit of a history, we originally had a Google spreadsheet to plan labels and machine names. If you look at it, this is an old one from a few years ago, and I think, Pucha, did you make these to begin with, or?
I don't know. I think I worked on it for like units.
I remember. Well, I got to Bluecadet. We were using them. So this helps plan at an early level just the fields that we want to reuse, our content types, our names, how we want to do field names, and it's migration. You have notes on what we're doing, what we get from the client. It's easy to get in there in a spreadsheet, write these things down instead of like trying to do it all in Drupal all the time. So that was a little bit of our history. Again, as I've mentioned, we have a typical way of doing things. We have defaults for our forms and our display formatters, but I'm always going in on every field and redoing all of that stuff. We also incurred a lot of technical debt on projects, especially some of these larger projects. So the one I mentioned earlier, THF in the fall, the Henry Ford Museum. I was doing a decoupled project with it, and so I was getting input from the designs, trying to architect the whole site, and from our technical lead on the project, and build out 300 of these fields. And I get in front of the content authors, and they're like, "This doesn't make any sense." And then our front end devs were like, "Well, I'm calling everything else. I'm calling everything other names." So there's a couple of places where a field might be labeled 3 different things. That the actual label is saying one thing for the content author, our machine name for the field is one thing, and then our key for our API is named another thing. So trying to debug that is a pain. So we can easily incur a lot of technical debt on these larger projects, and we just don't have the time and money to go back and redo all of that by clicking through and spending 3.5 minutes on each field. So again, this was the stuff that was kind of running around in my head. We should be able to automate this process. Like a lot of this stuff should be able to automate. The code is there. We should be able to do something with it. So we started with the basic proof of concept. So just to give you another little idea, I was moving at the time, and I was getting tired of moving boxes, and this is just bouncing around in my head as I'm mindlessly moving boxes around, and this is how it started. So we wanted to start with content types, taxonomy, terms, and paragraphs. We use paragraphs for most of our designs now to give us some flexibility. So these are the simple things that we needed. I wanted to do a plain text field, and then as I kept thinking about it, we really need to do entity reference or entity reference revision fields to do the paragraphs. If we couldn't do this, it was kind of a useless process. And amazingly, it kind of actually worked, and it was a little bit more straightforward than I thought. This is the first demo that I did. As you can see here, it's just the basic content type. We have no taxonomy, no paragraphs, a couple fields in a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet looks very similar. And, oh yeah, so that's the nodes and fields, very simple. And, I don't know, there we go, next tab. So here's kind of just a little form in the back end. I'm adding the CSV files. Again, we'll see this in a little more detail in a few minutes. And we run it, or I try to run it. It's running.
Very suspenseful.
I know, yeah, it's kind of. It's a good thing this is a video because I know what's going to happen. The next time we do this, we'll see what happens. We get a bunch of output because I'm still in development, and we create a bunch of fields. And you can see in here if we reload the taxonomy page, yay, we now have taxonomy, and we now have paragraph bundles, and we now have content types. I should have sped this up. Hold on. So yeah, it worked. It was cool. So again, we have this CSV. We have some structured data. We can throw it into code and build out all this stuff. So then from there, we started adding more. We added field groups. We use field groups a lot to help our backend kind of get a little bit more organized. One thing that we realized we need to do is update field groups as we're kind of doing this. If we reorder fields, we just wanted to be able to update them. We added a little bit of minor validation, as Mark can attest. We kind of run it like 10 times before we get it all because there's no like real validation or error checking in it at the moment. So we might type something wrong in the spreadsheet, and so it takes a couple times to actually get it done right at the moment. As many field types as we needed for our typical projects. So this is one thing. I was like all ready to go for Bucknell for this project, and I started building out the CSV or the spreadsheet. I was like, oh, you know what? I don't have this field. I don't have a name field. I don't have a telephone field. So we had to start doing all this stuff. So it took a lot longer to get it on a production project, but we're using it on 2 projects right now. Mark is using it on the second phase of THF, and I'm using it on the Bucknell project. And the list kept growing. So we actually have a decent list at the moment. So right now we are going to actually build a website in 5 minutes, hopefully. All right. So as we can see, we have a site here. I'm going to do the media config file config module that we did. So we're going to get all of our fields in our media. We're going to get all our entity browsers. So right now we have the default entity browser. We have just the image field on our image media content type. We have no content types. I got rid of the 2 basic ones from the install. We have no taxonomies. I got rid of the basic one for that. And we have no paragraph bundles. I'm going to refresh just to make sure. The other thing too to note, if you're in Git, at this point in time, you want to tag whatever commit that is. This is pre-import because we can easily destroy everything by going back to this commit. And we'll show you that in a minute. First what I need to do is install the media module, or our config media. Actually, it's 11:13 right now, so we're going to see if we can do this in 5 minutes. Drush enable. Pop this text up a little bit so you can see. So now we added a bunch of entity browsers. We've added a bunch of media fields. If I go back to my entity browsers, I now have a ton of entity browsers. I now have my caption and credit fields and my media tags taxonomy on that. And that was all in a few seconds. Again, what I'm going to do, because I don't need the module, I just imported those config files and ran those entity browsers. Turn off my module. And I can remove it from my project now. That I won't do because that's going to take out of my 5 minutes. So hide that. I was so worried about doing live coding or live stuff. I'd rather have everything in videos, but we're going to see how this goes. So I'll get to the CSV file in a second, but this was just our beginning of our Bucknell build, and I just want to get this started because it does take a few minutes. So obviously I wanted to have different options, like can we update things as we do this? Right now, again, this is very beginning stages, so we're just adding things if it doesn't exist. So we're going to import, and hopefully it all works. All right, it's starting, it's working. Okay, so I'm going to go to the CSV file real quick, or the spreadsheet. As you can see here, we just have a number of nodes and fields. And the cool part about this is, especially when you're reusing a field, you can copy and paste a whole line and add it to the bottom. Instead of making 13 more clicks to add a field, I can just copy and paste the line. Especially with paragraph bundles, we do that a lot. We have labels, titles, featured image. It's pretty much the same field, so I can copy and paste. I can edit and update things real quickly. What was added to this version is the field groups, so these blue things are the field groups. Still would like to work out a better way of handling that. But again, there's just a number of fields, number of paragraph bundles. We use a lot of paragraph bundles on this site. And taxonomy. Again, we only have one that's fielded, the icon one, but everything else, we just have a number of taxonomies that we knew we needed. And let's go back to the importer. We're still getting fields going.
Time's ticking, Pete.
I know. What was 11:13, right? It's 3 minutes. It should be. I think we're good.
Yeah, it's close.
My mouth is so driving to do this. I just don't want it to like error. There we go. Okay, and then all the devel stuff will show up. There we go. Because again, we're still early stages. I'm just printing out everything so I can debug it. But we do get to see we've built taxonomies, we've built paragraphs, we have content types, we have field, storage, and instances, and a lot going on there. So if I go back to my content types, there's all our content types. We have taxonomy. We have all our taxonomy terms, paragraphs. So basically, I now have a university website in 4 minutes. So that was the fun part. What we didn't tell you about was the 3 days that it took to create the spreadsheet to make sure we had everything in order. That I won't tell you about, though. No, but the big thing is, especially for kind of our decoupled projects, when we need to iterate on this, we need to fix something, we need to restructure. Again, the THF project, a number of times we'll decide that something needs to be in paragraph bundles, and all of a sudden we're like, oh, you know what, we need to reuse that. We need to make these nodes content types now. Going in and destroying everything and redoing it, and then the bug, because I was still trying to reference paragraph bundle and not the node, it can be a pain. So how do we refactor this really easily? Well, I can copy and paste those rows, throw them to my paragraph bundle CSV sheet, destroy my site, and build it again. So I mean, that's another thing too, is, we build the site for Bucknell. We did a couple of different iterations. I built it. I sent it off to my PM. I was like, what do you think? Play around with it, add something. He was like, you know what? I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't like this. Made those changes in 5 minutes, rebuilt the site, and had all those changes to him within an hour. So that was pretty powerful. That was pretty fun. I am going to do drush. Because I didn't export that config files, I can delete everything. And something didn't happen right there, but now we're deleting everything.
I can't tell you how nervous this makes me.
I'm like, my hands are shaking. I'm nervous.
Delete. Seeing this much delete scroll is like...
If I reload my page, oh shoot, I didn't actually show you that it worked. All right, well, if I went in there, I could add an image. I swear, it worked last night. But if I reload these content types, again, they're gone. Taxonomy terms are gone. Paragraphs are all gone. So now I can rebuild. Because I was at that state, I saved that state. I can go back and try to rebuild now. Another cool part about this, as I mentioned, Mark is working on phase 2 of the project. We're creating all new content types. So I have a spreadsheet specifically for those content types. I can work on an existing site and just work on those content types, blow out those content types, make revisions, add new content types. And yeah, it's kind of handy in that way. I think that was all that I wanted to show on that. Yes. So let's go back to, I need to stop this. Okay, so basically the whole thing about a lot of this stuff is, Drupal's backend is just a layer on top of code. We have all of these code things, the admin layer is just on top of code. Pantheon, we can click through everything, but we have Terminus, we can do all this kind of stuff. Drupal drush, we have drush commands to do a lot of these things as well. I think another, one thing that I thought about with that importer was trying to do drush commands. That could have been an option. That might still be an option. Next steps, we'll see. So the future for the importer, we want to be able to update it. Again, more validation, error checking. I think that's one of the biggest headaches at the moment is there's no validation on it, so we run it a couple times. Big questions, can we add it to automation? Can we add it to CI? Can we add it to Composer? And do we ever want to release it into Wild? So that's just kind of some of the things that we're thinking about. But really, for all of these tools, what are the benefits? So this is a custom in-house thing at the moment. Honestly, there would be a lot of work to get it as a contrib module or a release or anything like that. One thing, we have our defaults. They might not be your defaults. So one of the big things that it's hanging on is the way we do things. So that's a big part of putting it out in the wild. But there's still benefit for using it and being able to do this within your own company or your own agency. The first thing is just saving time. We want to save time. We want to get onto maybe the more fun stuff or the flashier stuff. For me, been working Drupal for a while. I'm just tired of clicking through Drupal. I want to do the big integrations. I want to do the big fun stuff. So we get rid of some of that mundane part. Standardizing fields, machine names. I think this is actually a really big part of it. There's been a number of projects where going back to the caption and credit fields, well, one project I named it field_media_caption, and the other one was field_caption. So I was trying to reuse front-end code, but the machine names were different, so I had to keep my mind on which project was which. So by standardizing some of those fields and machine names, we can help our front-end developers work better, and the connection between the two. As I mentioned earlier, we're starting to use Fractal a lot, so they can build in field names that we don't have to worry about it. We know we're always going to use the same field name for a caption. Now they can create components that they know what the field name is. Doesn't matter what project we're on. So I think that's actually a huge thing that we're hopefully be able to see in the future. Now that we've done 2 projects with this, we can easily copy and paste our old CSV files and create new fields much quicker, create that structure much quicker. Easily iterate, I think that's going to be a big potential for this, and for any of these customized tools. I can quickly update things. The image module that we're using, we updated the other day. We wanted a new entity browser. I could go in there, create that config piece really quickly, easily, and we now have a new entity browser. The next project that I install that module on, that's all already right there. I don't have to go in and create a new entity browser and deal with all that kind of stuff. Again, all these big builds, we can easily iterate on the projects. We can destroy and rebuild. Part of the big thing here is when do we stop using that? Bucknell, I stopped using it pretty early on, because as soon as actual content gets in the site, you obviously don't want to destroy it because there's content. And that was also kind of the next steps as far as being able to update the fields and paragraphs and content types. Could be interesting, but I also don't want to destroy content, so we'll see how that goes. But again, it's a big tool. We've actually made a lot of changes from that initial build, based on client needs, based on a lot of different things. And all of that stuff was done kind of by hand, clicking through the UI. Because content was in the site, we didn't want to destroy things, that kind of thing. So again, it helped us in the first delivery. I just pushed a button and I was like, I don't have to work for the next 3 weeks. It was great. Now I'm behind because I should have been working at those first 3 weeks. So thanks. Questions, comments, discussions. I know that was really fast. I was trying to do that. And yeah, that was really fast, but I wanted to discuss and questions and talk and all that kind of fun stuff. Yes?
So what are your thoughts on sharing the code?
Oh, well, okay, yeah. First, I would love to share the code. That's one thing I do want to do, and I thought I had it in here, but I guess not. It will be in the slide deck. If you download the slide deck, it will be in there. I think I had it for the other talk. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward, but yes, I will share it at some point in time. Hopefully a little less buggy, but it worked today, so that was good.
So
yes.
You're using the batch API.
Yes. Yeah, use the batch API. So we're doing a number of runs, basically validating the CSV file. It's basically saying you have rows and I know where to end. We're building out huge arrays for everything, and then we do another run to build the actual content types or vocabulary before the fields, because we can't reference something that doesn't exist yet. And then we're actually doing the fields. And then taxonomy, we can actually do a list of terms. If we need terms, we can automatically add terms. The other problem with that I didn't show you is because I can't then automatically delete everything, because it won't, the config import won't run because you have content. So I didn't have that here, but yes. So it's doing a bunch of runs. So far, I have a really huge test file, and it takes forever, but it actually runs, so it's worked out pretty well. Yes?
How do you organize some of the deeper settings that a field might have in your spreadsheet? I'm thinking the one to bane of my existence.
Uh-huh.
A site that has 30 or 40 paragraphs, but some of them are used on this content type, some of them are used on that.
Yes.
Keeping all of that organized. It wouldn't map easy to adopt.
Yes, it is a pain. So that was one of the big challenges. So first of all, going back to what I said earlier, we have a lot of defaults, so I set everything up to if you have the whole row blank, all the settings blank, we're using the defaults that we typically use at Bluecadet. But if you want to update those, so adding which paragraph bundles, I think using the paragraph bundles, it's just like a pipe delimited list for that. The other deeper settings, we're using kind of like a JSON string. That was one thing. I kind of did 3 different things, so I want to go back and fix that on the CSV file. I'm going to exit out of here real quick. And go back to here. I think I'm this way. If we look at that, I'm not sure what happened there. Because it's on a different screen, I guess, maybe. It is messy. It is a little annoying.
Try Command 0, because I think we're switching resolution as well. It's too much data.
Yeah. Well.
Too much.
Refresh the page.
Yeah. Keyboard's not working. There we go. Whoa. So here is a paragraph bundle, and these are all the paragraphs that I need to copy over. So again, part of the validation stuff, if I type this in and I type it in incorrectly, one, it's not going to work, and then we're going to get an error on the importer, so I got to figure that out. That's been something that caused some of our errors. And then some of these settings, they look somewhat like JSON, but not always. Figuring out third-party settings. So we use the allowed formats module a lot to hide that help text. So trying to set that. This is actually in our default. I was trying to figure out why I have it on the sheet. We don't actually need it on the sheet because that's our default. And then a couple of these get a little nasty. It's hard to read. If as the developer, if you're in the code, you might know what's going on. But if you're not, if I had a PM come in here, they would never they could do the names and label everything, but they couldn't do anything else. So it is a little messy that way. Oh, the other thing too is these are only the default form and the default displays. That part 2 is adding other displays and stuff like that.
Does it support display mode as well too, or just?
Well, so yeah, just the default. I do want to add in the display modes. I think could be straightforward, but I don't know. That was part 2 or phase 3, maybe.
Yeah, for our stuff, it didn't matter too much because, well, maybe on Bucknell a little bit, but for the Henry Ford project, because it was decoupled, we weren't really worrying too much about the display modes.
Yeah.
For things, it was we just needed content types, taxonomy, paragraph bundles.
Yeah.
Right.
But if we're building a website site, like a grown-up website, then yeah, the view mode stuff will really quickly become important.
And some of that too, the way I work, I don't finalize something until I'm actually doing it. So that was a big part with Bucknell was I was trying to plan all this stuff before I was in Drupal, and I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. Display formatters are one of those things where, well, oh yeah, I do need a teaser, or oh, this teaser isn't actually a teaser, it's a short teaser. So, some of those decisions I don't make personally until I get into it. I'm doing it, so that might be a little bit hard to plan for. But again, yeah, for a website, it would be nice to be able to make more display modes.
Definitely. Another question: does the importer module support block type entity as well too? And I'm asking about that because if you want to use layout builder on your site, is that something that can be configurable?
We don't have block types at the moment now. Okay. But that's something that could be added. Yeah, sure. Phase 4.
Awesome.
I don't know why the screen died.
That happened to me last year. It's either on a timer.
Yeah. It's still red though.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, I think the projector system is just I was midway through my presentation last year. And
well, we don't have any more slides to show, so yeah. Any other? So yeah, again, just overall, Drupal can be tinkered with to bend it to your will, and I think that's the main thing I wanted to really get across. That's the stuff that I kind of like doing, helping to improve your process, all that kind of stuff. It's easy, or not easy, but you can figure it out. Copying core code, I do it all the time. It's all there. You can find it if you look deep enough and can read the code a little bit. So, any other questions?
One way this really speeds you all up is because you already had the process of planning. Full company adopted the process of planning your projects in a spreadsheet. And so the Google Docs you have are maybe slightly standardized or modified, and all your people are used to filling that out for a project anyway. And then from there you put them side by side and look through everything. Now you're saying, okay, I'll just take that spreadsheet and let the machine do it.
Yes, yeah, it's pretty much what was bouncing in my head. I was like, why am I doing this when I should be able to automate this. I should be able to have it done.
I'm leaning on Pete to just to go straight to Google Drive. Instead of exporting a CSV, just use the API to pull it directly.
That was phase 2. That's phase 2. That part's phase 2.
I don't know. Like,
Yeah, exporting.
on Fridays, I'm like, hey, have we eliminated the CSV part of this from the channel?
Basically, you're exporting your Google Doc as CSV.
As a CSV file.
Yeah,
Yeah,
CSV.
Mhm. That's correct. Yeah. Yeah.
In some ways, the CSV is nice because you could actually version that. You could version like 0.5 of your CMS, get that out to your content authors, and do user acceptance testing. And then a week later, you have all their feedback, and you just tinker with the spreadsheet for a little bit. I'm basically describing what I did for phase 2 of the Henry Ford, because I inherited that, and he was done with the importer. I basically pushed off my work on group 2 as far as I could, because he was like, it's almost there. I'm like, all right. I was like, I gotta get rolling on this thing, and if I have to click through, I'm actually behind. But Pete wrapped up one of the initial builds of the importer. So I rolled through a alpha build of the CMS and got back feedback. And because the one caveat is there's not a ton of content. Any content that's created is just for testing. I was able to, like Pete showed, wipe, destroy, load in version 1.0 now, the beta release of that CMS. And the actual time spent in Drupal is, minutes. It was more just like, oh, it needs to be a node instead of a paragraph level. That's a real situation. Like, oh, we actually want to reuse these things across different structures. But yeah, it's trivial. It's more like copy and paste there, which is still faster than clicking and waiting for, waiting for Lando to respond locally.
Yeah.
Although, if anybody wants to chat about turbocharging Lando,
I gotta try that out because
I've dove into the deep depths of of their documentation.